What if Spider-Man could fire webs from his wrists? Is it possible? Let's get into it. To put it simply, no, a human cannot spin webs out of their hands. But it's not because it's impossible or too difficult to do. It's because humans don't have the equipment needed to produce silk. Animals like spiders and silkworms spin webs using protein-based materials that are stronger than steel and lighter than titanium. These materials are called fibroin and Kevlar, which can only be created by certain insects and arachnids. They do this by combining amino acids and other organic compounds in ways that humans currently can't replicate. So until we figure out how to make these super materials ourselves, we won't be able to spin webs. And even if we could, it wouldn't be very useful without the right tools. You see, spiders use spinnerets, located at the end of their abdomen, to extrude the liquids they create into threads. Then they use their legs and bodies to manipulate the threads into webs. Humans would need to find a way to attach spinnerets to their wrists without getting in the way of our dexterity. Or maybe we should just try growing spider-like abilities. Who was the first Spider-Man villain? Now that's a great question. Who do you think was the first Spider-Man villain? Do you know? Well, here's a hint. He was one of the first villains in Amazing Spider-Man number 14. But before we reveal who he is, let's talk about the beginning of Spider-Man. You see, Spider-Man first appeared in Amazing Fantasy number 15 in August of 1962. This story introduced us to Peter Parker, a nerdy high school student who got bitten by a radioactive spider and gained spider-like abilities. This comic also introduced us to his Uncle Ben, who taught him that with great power comes great responsibility. However, Amazing Fantasy number 15 did not focus much on villains. The main story was about Peter learning how to control his new powers, but that all changed when Amazing Spider-Man number 14 hit newsstands in May of 1963. This issue contained two stories. The first one introduced us to Doc Ock, but that wasn't the first villain. Wait, it's Mysterio. Yep, the special effects artist turned evil villain Quentin Beck made his first appearance in the Amazing Spider-Man number 13, which came out just 3 months before Amazing Spider-Man number 14. But wait, there's more. Mysterio actually appeared alongside another villain, the Chameleon. So does that mean the Chameleon was the very first Spider-Man villain? Not so fast. There's one more comic that came out before those. In the Amazing Spider-Man number 12, Peter Parker finds himself facing off against the infamous villain known as the Tinkerer. So who's the real first Spider-Man villain? Drumroll, please. The answer is none of the above. That's right, the first Spider-Man villain was the one and only Mysterio. But he didn't appear alone. Mysterio teamed up with the Chameleon to take on Spider-Man. The Amazing Spider-Man number 12, and that's where the Tinkerer made her first appearance. And then in the next issue, Amazing Spider-Man number 13, Mysterio and the Chameleon return to face off against Spider-Man once again. But then in Amazing Spider-Man number 14, Mysterio makes his third solo appearance as a villain. So Mysterio is officially the first Spider-Man villain, but it's not quite over yet. Spider-Man went on to fight many more villains after that, including Doc Ock, who made his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man number 3. He was technically the second villain, but the fourth to appear in print. And yes, the Chameleon and Tinkerer were both villains who made their first appearances in comics before Doc Ock. So while Mysterio might be the first official villain, there's a lot more to come. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program. So we talked about how Spider-Man can't swing between buildings using his webs because he doesn't have spinnerets on his wrists. But what if he did? Could he still swing? The good news is yes, it's theoretically possible for Spider-Man to swing between buildings if he had spinnerets on his wrists. Here's how it works. First, Spider-Man would need to shoot a line from his wrist-mounted spinneret. This line needs to be attached to something solid on the building to work. Next, Spider-Man would need to shoot another line from the same wrist, connecting it to the first line and swinging around the building. By adjusting the tension on the lines, Spider-Man can control his movement and swing to other buildings. But there are some problems. Swinging requires a lot of energy. And for Peter to keep swinging, he'd need to constantly shoot new lines and adjust their tension. This means that Peter would need a backup plan in case he runs out of webbing. Also, shooting a web from a moving position isn't easy. It takes a lot of practice and coordination to master. So, Spider-Man would need to spend a lot of time practicing before he can safely swing between buildings. But what if we added a twist to this? What if instead of using webs to swing, Spider-Man used his spider senses? His spider senses can detect danger and changes in his environment. If Spider-Man uses his spider senses to sense the wind currents around him, he may be able to swing between buildings without any webs at all. Of course, this would require a lot of training and practice, but hey, anything's possible, right? Why is Venom black? Venom, one of Spider-Man's most famous and intimidating villains, is usually depicted as a terrifying creature with a black symbiotic costume. But why is it black? Well, there are a few reasons for Venom's dark look. First, the symbiote that bonded with Eddie Brock, the man under the Venom costume, was originally black. This is because the symbiote came from a planet called Clinter where everything was black. The planet's atmosphere blocked out the sun, creating a perpetual night. So the symbiotes evolved to be black in order to camouflage themselves. Second, Venom's black look is meant to represent his evil nature. Black is often used in comics to represent evil and darkness, and Venom's costume is no exception. Finally, Venom's black costume is a stark contrast to Spider-Man's red and blue suit, making Venom stand out as a truly unique and unforgettable villain. But Venom hasn't always been black. In fact, when he first appeared in the comics, he was white. This was because the symbiote had bonded with a different host. But when the symbiote transferred to Eddie Brock, he became Venom and his costume became black. So while Venom's black look is iconic, it's not his only color. That's all for now, folks. But if you want to learn more about Spider-Man, stay tuned for more updates.